Falkenrath. He's a Bloomberg contributing editor. He is a principal at the Chertoff Group. He is a former deputy of Homeland Security under President George W. Bush. Richard, always glad to see you. How bad do we look from everybody else's perspective? I mean, were charges brought too quickly? Was Dominic Strauss-Kahn unfairly treated? Where do we start?
I think we look bad mainly in the eyes of the French elite who had some sympathy for Dominic Strauss-Kahn. I think the rest of the world has seen our justice system it working before, and it sort of worked in this case. I mean, yes, he was treated quite harshly when he was initially charged. That's common in our system, but ultimately the facts came forward, and it appears this week, maybe even today, that charges will be dropped against him.
So what do you think is going to happen this week, Richard?
Well, I think there's probably, over the weekend, my guess is there were final negotiations between his attorneys and the district attorney here in the terms of the release. It may be that he is cooperating in an investigation against her, the hotel maid, and she may be charged, and his testimony may be used in a charge of her. That's one possibility. Another is that his counsel were actually seeking some sort of an apology or a complete dismissal with some accompanying statement by the district attorney exonerating him, possibly trying to rehabilitate his political career back in France.
Well, speaking of rehabilitation, what does this say? I want to get back to our image again and this sort of presumption of innocence, because as you know, Richard, I mean, in France, you're actually not allowed to show a perp walk. You are not allowed to show either video or photos of someone until that person has been found guilty. Then you can go and show all the back footage in the world that you want. But do we look barbaric?
Well, certainly the French elite seem to think so, at least a few of them do. And that image of him coming out of the station house in handcuffs, unshaven, unkept, is what really is seared into their minds. Yeah, and a few nights on Rikers Island is not a pleasant place to be at all. And so from their perspective, it looks like he was tried and convicted. He lost his job, and he was publicly humiliated before he was ever convicted. And so in that respect, the justice system doesn't look that good. But
what about our press?
Yeah, the press also is seen as having a feeding frenzy about this. Now, anyone who follows press knows that's what the New York tabloid press does, and this happens quite regularly.
And we're not the only ones, right? I mean, in the UK, the press is equally as aggressive.
Very aggressive. The royal family has felt this. The other members of the UK elite have felt it again and again. And there is freedom of the press in this country. So you have the collision of these two interests: presumption of innocence and freedom of the press. And if the press gets on a story that makes someone look guilty, then there's nothing that person can do, really. Our libel laws are very weak here. This is not like the UK, where they have very strong libel laws, and someone like Dominic Strauss-Kahn could often seek damages against them afterwards. Here, totally impossible.
So, Richard, one thing I want to ask you, I mean, you worked with the NYPD. What do you make of Cy Vance? I mean, he really seems to have had a very rough first year on the job. Does he lose his job because of this high-profile case and the way it was handled?
Well, he will be up for re-election in 2.5 years, and so that our DAs are elected publicly, and he'll have to compete against someone, and whoever runs against him will use this record against him for sure. He has quite a while to get these memories behind him and to build a record for himself that will sustain him through re-election. But there have been a few high-profile cases that have gone awry in his first year in office.
But would you say this is by far the worst one?
This is the most high profile, but at least he didn't lose in trial. I mean, that's the real loss. What happened here is the case fell apart. He saw the evidence, provided it to the defense counsel, leading to the dismissal, presumably this week, of charges.
Richard, thanks as always. Richard Falkenrath joining us right here in the newsroom. He is a